Hey there, Jim Gavigan, Industrial Insight. Want to talk with you guys about some things that have come up in our data fidelity studies. And this is a subject that I'm not sure people really understand. You'll see a lot of discussion out there where, people say you should only collect data when the data changes, on demand. You hear a lot of that in the MQTT community and things of that nature. And that's good. I agree. We shouldn't, polling is not always the best way to handle things. However, there is an issue that can come up, and I want to talk about that. So what you're looking at on my screen here is a trend for a flow that happens to be for one of our customers in the data fidelity study. And this is a compliance issue. This is a flow that they need to report on either to the EPA or it's a production reporting thing. And one of the things about this is you'll see on, let's see if I can get my arrow over here, on the 20th or so of August, the flow value was around 0. It steadily increased until about sometime on the 26th, and then it went to 0. I'm not sure that's what happened. Something tells me that that is not exactly how that signal flowed. And the reality is customers already told me that. And we checked off the archived and recommended traces on this particular data point. And we see this is the raw data coming in. Literally, it goes from 0 to 8.2 or something like that on the 26th. So the reality is that flow did not gently increase over time in a linear fashion over 6 days. The problem is if you're doing data analysis and or trending this value, that's what you get. Because you're only sending data when it changes. So what I want to point out is in an OPC server, or at least with a Pi system, I haven't verified this with everything, but at least say with a Pi system, there is a setting, and I'll pull that screen up here in just a minute, called Trend Advise. And what Trend Advise does is it actually takes a reading just before, it basically will take another 0 reading at some time interval based on how often you're scanning it. There's a formula for it. And so it kind of creates a step function essentially, which is really what this should have looked like. It should look like 0 until they turn the flow on, and then it should go up. And that setting takes care of that. So I'm going to pause this video for a minute, and I'm going to pull that up here in just a second. Okay, so the idea of Trend Advise, and again, this is Pi specific. Okay, I'm sure there are settings in your SCADA system, in your OPC system, that allow this kind of data to be pushed across to your data historian or wherever you happen to be collecting the data. But I want to point this out. This is something you need to be able to deal with. It's great to say, I only want to push the data when it changes. That's great. The problem is when it's 0 for a really long time, or some kind of steady state for a really long time, and then it changes, say a valve that goes from open to close, is it'll look like it took a really long time to close. And that is a very poor representation of the process, and it's going to confuse your people, and they're going to get upset because that's not really what the process is doing. So again, Trend Advise, what they had showed was if it is off and the value went from 10 to 1, 10 to 1, 10 to 1, etc., you basically get this kind of sawtooth pattern, right? If you turn Trend Advise on, is it will send that 1 signal and then then the 10, because that's literally what it is. It went from 1, it had been 1 for a long time, then shot up to 10. So, hey, let's get 1 at some time interval before, and there's a formula down here. And so I'm not going to sit here and, go through this, but it happens to do with, the scan rates and, the previous timestamps, new timestamps, all that kind of stuff. So it does pick a time in the past where it says, hey, this value was 1, now it's 10. And I just think this is a really important concept, because so many people today are saying, well, you shouldn't poll anymore, and you should only send data when it changes. And it all works great until you get a data point like this that doesn't change very much, very often. And you'll have days and days where it's a sloped line from open to close, from 0 to 8, 1 to 10, things of that nature. And that's not what really happened. And so I just want to point that out. I think make sure that whatever system you happen to be working in, that it can handle this scenario and it handles it well. So anyway, a little advice based on things that we're actually seeing out of these data fidelity studies. It's not something you really expect, but this was an incredibly frustrating issue for the customer. And I'm really hoping this was actually in a FactoryTalk Historian system. And I'm hoping the FactoryTalk Live data interface allows us to do trend advise, or there's a way to do it. We haven't gotten in and dug around in there yet, so may post an update video on that. But I'm really hoping that it allows us to do that, because this is a problem. So anyway, I hope this helps you, and hope this educates you a little bit.